Hey folks, Happy New Year. It is application season from here to the end of May. And this is where it all starts. Today we are going to talk about priorities, value, and maybe your dreams. And in part of this, I'm going to sound a little bit like the accountant. Okay, most of you know I'm a CPA in my other life. And I am as big of a tightwad when it comes to certain things that you're going to wonder, how do I ever draw any tags if I do that much analysis about, is this the value proposition? And what I mean when I say value is it's an intersection of where the price, both the upfront cost, the tag cost, the sunk cost that you don't get back, and the quality of the hunt that you want to go on. There's a value where those two intersect. That's where you get the greatest value. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about it by species. We're going to talk about it in terms of rifle elk, archery elk, mule deer, and pronghorn. And I'm going to go through every state. And this is an update of a video that I did in 2021. And we're going to show tons of screenshots that kind of give you, here's each state, here's what I, as Randy Newberg, my opinion of what's the greatest value. But there's going to be columns about the cost. There's going to be columns about ease of drawing. And you probably would add your own columns like, what's the percentage of public land? What's the harvest rates? All that kind of stuff. So when we get all done with this, my goal is that you have set your priority of what you want for this application season. In fact, I'm kind of thinking the subtitle for all the videos that we're going to do this year is Get Your Tag in 2024. Because that is the first step. Unless you have elk or deer or pronghorn as an over-the-counter item in your home state, you need to know all this stuff, and you need to be thinking about it. And if you're like everybody else I know, you got a budget. You got a budget of time and you got a budget of money. I can't tell you how to spend your budget of time, but my hope in this video is I give you some ideas of how to get the most out of your application budget. So for this, I'm going to focus on how do you set a priority that is reasonable and you're going to accomplish it, whether it's short-term, long-term, maybe it's midterm in between there. And how do you get the most out of that budget? And I've had a lot of people ask me, well, are there any states you don't apply for? Oh yeah, I don't apply for Colorado moose, goat, or sheep. I don't apply for Wyoming moose, goat, or sheep. In Idaho, I've pretty much given up on moose, goat, and sheep, and I just do deer, elk, and pronghorn. New Mexico, I don't do sheep. There's a lot of states and a lot of places I could apply, but I don't, because I've got a limited budget. I am only going to spend money in places where I think I get a good value, and it's one of my priorities. Either a priority because I want to go hunt that landscape, or because I'm really passionate about archery elk or rifle pronghorn or big mule deer or whatever. So I'm going to just give kind of 3 points of what I think are the places you got to start and the things you got to look at. And then we're going to get into a bunch of these spreadsheets. So, right, it wouldn't be a video with a CPA without a bunch of spreadsheets. I'm the Charlie Daniels of Excel. In fact, before it was Excel, it was Lotus 1, 2, 3 and Quattro Pro. Some of you old folks like me remember those spreadsheet programs. But let's get started. Point number 1, very first thing I do is I say, what is my highest priority? And then what's my second priority? And so on and so on and so on. Maybe my highest priority is Wyoming elk. Okay, that's where you start. And then as you fill in your other priorities, you allocate your budget to Wyoming elk. how do we make sure you get a Wyoming elk tag this year? Or maybe you got a longer term plan for Wyoming elk, but how do we know that what you're doing each year is building towards that long-term plan? And in the process, maybe you're getting the opportunity to draw one of the random tags. That's the very first thing. Sit down and say, here's my priority for this year. And here's my priority for 3 to 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years. And here's my priority when I get old and gray like Randy. Without priorities, you really don't know what you're shooting for and how to allocate that budget appropriately. So then we get into this thing called budgets. Like I said, I can't allocate your budget of time, but we can get into what your budget should be. Now, when I first started this, I started with one state. I couldn't afford multiple states. I started with Colorado. And then the next year, I think I added Nevada, if I remember right. And then I added Arizona. Every year, I tried to add another state, to the point where now I apply in a handful of states. But they're only the states that I have an interest in. You know, some people apply in Kansas and they apply in, South Dakota and they apply. And those are all great places if that's your priority. But those aren't my priorities, so I don't apply there. So that's the next step. What is your budget for this process? And if you can, be thinking about how you build that budget over time. Because there's going to be 3 types of costs. There's going to be the upfront costs we focus on. In other words, Wyoming, New Mexico, they make you send in all the money for the tag. That's going to eat up a lot of your budget. Do you have enough cash to do that in one of those states? Or do you got to focus on the states where, okay, all I got to do is I only got to buy the non-resident license and pay the application fee? Well, using that strategy, you're not fronting a lot of money and you can probably tackle more states, increasing your odds. But maybe the state that is your priority requires upfront money. So you got the cost, the cost we focus on is the upfront cost. We focus on what we call fixed cost or sunk costs. In other words, money you're not going to get back. You're probably not getting your non-resident license fee back. You're not getting your application fee back. Some states you're going to have to pay a transaction or a credit card fee, and you're not getting that back. So then you look at all that, and then you have to actually look at, if you're using the model of, okay, I'm not going to go to states where I got to front a lot of money. You do have to look at what the tag fee is if you draw. Because the last thing you want to do is throw all your money into one state right at the beginning that maybe was only priority number 2 or 3, and you run out of cash. So that's what I talk about when I say make sure you establish what your budget is. Because you're going to see that, what I talk about in these sheets. And then, the sunk cost, that's just a cost of doing business. I wish we could get rid of those, but we can't. The states have figured out how to make a lot of money on that. You think about Wyoming, just for elk, they sell 180,000 non-resident elk points. Do the math, 180,000 times 50, they make $9 million just selling elk points. That's not going away. That's a sunk cost. You just got to add it in as the budget. So anyhow, with those things as our starting point, we're going to jump right into rifle elk. Now, some of you might look at this and say, why aren't you accounting? I'm interested in sheep. I'm interested in mountain goat and moose and bison. These species are kind of like buying lottery tickets. They're really rare that you're going to draw, and the cost can be pretty heavy. So I think I'm going to do a short video on that follows up from this one. So for right now, just know that I'm not getting into that in this video. Look for that, maybe a follow-up video. A lot of this is my opinion, okay? Based on what I look for as a hunt, based on where I'm at in my hunting life, based on the landscapes. Now, if my only priority was I got to shoot a 360-inch bull elk or a 180-inch mule deer or an 84-inch pronghorn, these priorities and these rankings you see me put on these sheets would be a whole lot different. So, rifle elk, here we go. I got the spreadsheet right in front of me. And you see, well, I'm gonna call it firearms elk, okay? That's rifle or muzzleloader. Anything other than archery. Now, you're going to see in my chart, I have a short-term plan, a midterm plan, and a long-term plan. Because I'm thinking you're probably going to be in this for a while. You're not just a one-and-done kind of person. And if we look at the number of applicants throughout the West, I don't care what state it is, that have double-digit points for a species in a state, it's significant. So there's a lot of people that have been doing this for over a decade. And I'm assuming you're probably somewhat like them, where you want to go hunting today, so we look at a short-term plan, 0 to 4 years. We look at a midterm plan that you're kind of building for, 5 to 9 years. And you got a long-term plan that is 10 years and beyond. So we look at Arizona, and you'll see my columns. I got each state that I think is worthy of your consideration. Now you'll notice that Oregon has elk. I don't have it on here because I think for non-residents, a small percentage of tags, Oregon's not worth the discussion. You'll see that I don't have Alaska on here because for elk, Alaska is just, it's a fringe state. You'll see that Washington is not on here. Again, kind of like Oregon. The cost versus the opportunity, it's just not a good proposition for a traveling non-resident. Why would you, if you live in Missouri, why would you drive through maybe Colorado and Idaho to get to Washington to hunt elk? No, hunt Colorado, hunt Idaho. So when you look at this for Arizona, there are not many short-term options. Now, midterm options, I end up with a late rifle tag in Arizona probably every, I don't know, 6 to 8 or 9 years. If I really wanted to hold out for one of the special early rifle, early muzzleloader, some of the early firearms hunts, those are 10 years or longer. Gonna cost you $825 for lock, stock, and barrel if you draw. Now we go to Colorado. Colorado has the largest elk herd of all the western states. Now, short term, 0 to 4 years, there's over-the-counter, which might be going away someday, so be paying attention on that. They have committees right now working on that. The first rifle hunts in a lot of their units can be had with 0 to 4 points. So there's an option there. If you're looking for something that you're going to build more of a 5 to 9 year plan, I'd say some of the muzzleloader hunts, because they happen in September while the archery hunting is going on, a lot of people want to go do that. So there's more demand actually for those than you'd think. Then there's a lot of first rifle units that are available with 5 to 9 points. Then we're getting to 10 years plus. We're talking about the units up in Northwest Colorado, a few of the limited entry units. Some would say, oh, that's not Northwest, that's West Colorado. Okay, there's some units in West Colorado also, but those ones up in the Northwest, you're gonna be here a long time trying to draw that tag. Cost, $807.24, lock, stock, and barrel. We're talking app fees, licenses, and tag fee. Now we get to Idaho, which is a great elk state. And the short-term option is their over-the-counter / general tag that goes on sale December 1st. Since they started allocating us to a zone instead of just a general tag, they sell out on December 1st. Now, a lot of them get returned, and you can pick them up when they get returned. So don't forget that option. Now, there's some of their controlled hunts that are a little bit easier to draw. 5 to 9 years. I say there's some that are midterm. They're controlled hunts, which are what they call their limited entry hunts. There's some of them that your odds of drawing are, you're gonna have to apply a lot of times unless you get really lucky. And in Idaho, they don't have a point system, so it's not like you feel like you're making progress towards it. Every year, same thing. Cost $846.75. And then we get to Montana. Again, short term is the general tag. You'll draw that every 3 years if you're in the preference point system. It's a weird system. We'll get into that in the Montana video. Then if you're willing to apply, there are a few limited entry tags that might be, you know, a midterm or a middle of the road kind of plan, 5 to 9 years. For non-residents, most of the limited entry rifle tags in Montana are going to be double-digit points to have much of a chance. But those are on a bonus point system, so you never know. Fee $846 or $1,050.50. Then we get to Nevada. It's easy. There are no short-term, there are no long-term or midterm. They're all long-term options, unless you want to apply for one of the cow hunts or one of the spike hunts. And that gets me thinking about this. I'm talking about, these are bull elk opportunities. I'm not talking about cow elk. Maybe someday we should do the same exact video for cow elk. But Nevada, you are just looking at long-term options. Yeah, every year somebody draws with 3 points as a non-resident, and you're like, whoa, how'd you pull that off? A lot of cost, $1,376 if you were to draw, counting your license and your app fee. New Mexico, you know, there are not a lot of what I would call short-term options in New Mexico. In fact, I'd say almost none. And if you get to what I'll call midterm options, some of them might be possible. The rifle hunts, the lower demand rifle hunts. We're talking northern New Mexico, the fringe areas outside their primary core elk area. But as a general rule, you're probably looking at 10 years plus. In other words, you're going to find very few units where your odds are better than 10%, right? Or your probability. And so if your probability is 10%, not saying it always works out this way, but hopefully about every 10 years or a little more, you'll draw. So any of the high quality, we call them HQ, rifle hunts are going to be very, very low draw odds. It just is what it is. Now the cheapest tags, and they have a different price structure. They call it quality and high quality are more expensive in New Mexico. If you apply for what they call standard, those are lower price, $690 out of pocket. And then we get to Utah. Utah is so much like Nevada. A lot of interest in Utah. If you're going to go there and you're going to hunt every year, every other year, you better get in line for the over-the-counter, the general, or the spike only. There really aren't any short-term options for non-residents in Utah. Now, there's some midterm options, maybe, but even these are getting harder to draw. They're called HAMS hunts. I think it's handgun, archery, muzzleloader, shotgun is what HAMS stands for. There's a few units that are these HAMS hunts, and I think even now they've changed the name to something archery, something muzzleloader. Anyhow, those are rare. They don't have many of them. So if you're going to do Utah, you're probably looking at a limited entry hunt that is going to take a lot of points, like more than 20 points. The point pile, and we'll get into the point pile that is Utah when we do the Utah video. It's a crazy number of people with 20 plus points. So if you do luck out and draw, it's $1,186 when you count your license. Now we get into Wyoming. We got short term, midterm, long term. Now, the Wyoming also adds this complication of the regular price draw and the special price draw. Same tag, it's just supposedly you get better draw odds if you're willing to pay a lot more. And this year, for that special draw, it's $2,035. And the regular draw is only $779. So I don't know, that's a new thing this year. I don't know if that's gonna change the draw odds dramatically. When they first started, there were way better odds in the special than the regular, but over time, those came really close. They weren't that much of a difference. So now in Wyoming, they have 3 areas for general tags. And we'll get into this in the Wyoming video. But when we say GEN, general, that's Wyoming's acronym on the application for their general tags. Those, depending on what draw you put in, regular or special, that probably is a 0 to 40-year plan. Now, we get to the midterm of 5 to 9 years. They have some rifle hunts that, the odds aren't that bad. They're not great, but they're not that bad. So there's a few of them that you might be able to get in on a midterm hunt. Long term, there's some really quality tags in Wyoming that take 10 plus points. Lots of them. Especially with non-residents getting only 16% of the limited entry tags. The number of points it takes for non-residents every year grows and grows and grows and grows. So I think this year the maximum is 18 or 19 points in Wyoming. There's a lot of people with max points. So like I said, if you draw in Wyoming, the total cost is, depending on whether you put in the special or the regular, varies from $779 up to $2,036. So with all that, if you're a rifle elk hunter and you say, all right, I got to balance short-term, mid-term, long-term goals. I got to balance a lot of other stuff. For me, I'm willing to go and hunt with a rifle in the non-premium periods. And those can be later seasons like, November and December. So I rank Arizona higher than some other people would. Now, some people would say, no, Colorado. I love Colorado. They got their first rifle. It's middle of October. The weather's nice. So some people might rank Colorado differently than I do. But if I look at all of these for a rifle hunt, and now when we switch over to the archery page, you're going to see my ranking changes somewhat. I think Wyoming, if you want to hunt elk in the West on public land, in my mind, Wyoming should be your highest priority. It's got great opportunity. It's got lots of public land. It's got quality elk. It's got a system that's somewhat predictable. 75% of the tags go on a point system, but 25 go just randomly. So every year when you're building towards your long-term or maybe your midterm plan, you still have a chance. And for the quality, it'll be interesting to see how many people think that the quality is worth the $2,000 special elk tag this year, but it is surely worth the regular price $770 some tag. So that's my number 1 state for rifle elk. For number 2 is Arizona. And I say that because of the late rifle hunts. And even now, some of the late rifle hunts are extending in where it's, in a few of the units, it's getting to be a long-term plan, but there's enough of the middle of the road units that you could do it. Just so much public ground, quality hunts. They don't push everybody in the woods at one time. And the price is pretty reasonable. I kind of flip back and forth about what my number 3 state would be. Would it be Colorado, Idaho, Montana, or New Mexico for rifle? And I landed on New Mexico, but I want to nominate Colorado, Idaho, and Montana as maybe an equal runner-up. And it depends on what time of year you like to hunt. In Montana, the harder part is it's in November. Been a lot of hunting pressure in the weather, pushes a lot of those bulls off the public land down into private. So that's probably one of the frustrations that knocks Montana out of the top 3 for rifle elk hunting. But you'll see that changes in the archery picture that I talk about. So I settled on New Mexico as number 3, just because they have some really good hunting there, and if you're not tied to just having to hunt the absolute, best of the best, and you're willing to hunt some of the off seasons, and you're willing to hunt some of the muzzleloader seasons, New Mexico is number 3 for me. Now, that could change next year. I might be like, I don't know. If you forced my hand and asked me to pick number 4, I'd probably pick Colorado. So anyhow, in my column over to the right, I show the ease of drawing. In other words, which states are the easiest to just get a tag? And that goes in this order: Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, New Mexico, Arizona. Hard to believe Arizona is easier to draw a tag than Utah and Nevada, but it is. So now I'm going to jump over to archery, and I'm not going to go through every, all the costs and all that. But I think when you see these laid over each other, you're going to see some things. Instantly, I'm sure your eye went to the fact that, wow, he dropped Arizona and New Mexico, and he replaced it with Montana and Idaho as far as my top 3 priorities, or my top 3 states for archery elk. Costs are still the same, but we're talking differences in draw odds. We're talking differences in where the elk are during the archery season. We're talking about how generous the state is with general tags, because a lot of these general tags are a better archery tag than they are a rifle tag. And you'll notice my 3 states that I think are top notch have a ton of general tags, because the general tags can be really good archery hunts. So Arizona, there's not a lot of options other than the late archery. And that's even short-term, mid-term. If you want to hunt archery in Arizona, it's a long-term proposition. Colorado, short-term, as long as they keep over the counter, it's still an option. Might change. Midterm, they got a lot of midterm options. And then the long-term stuff is way up there in the Northwest. Idaho, they give away, I think, 12,000 some non-resident general over-the-counter tags. And that's a great option. And those are that short-term option. And then they're controlled hunts, kind of like with rifle, could be midterm or long-term. Montana, their general tag is a great tag for archery elk. Not so much for rifle elk. And midterm, long-term, there's some limited entry archery-only hunts that you could look at. I'm just going to add Montana or Nevada and Utah in this same discussion, that there really are no midterm or short-term options in those states when it comes to archery. Just too much demand, and everything's long-term in those 2 states. That causes me to skip over New Mexico real quickly, but the first archery seasons in New Mexico, they're leaving. Some of them used to be possibly short-term options. Couple still are, but most of them you're going to be over in the midterm, even for the early archery. Second archery, you're going to be, those are the prime times. You're going to be either midterm if you're lucky, but mostly you're going to be long-term for that second archery season. Wyoming, here's the beauty of Wyoming, just like Montana. If you draw your general tag, you can come and hunt in the archery season in most units, not all, but most. And if you don't draw, you can come back in the rifle season. So you look again, right? Nothing has changed in the price. Nothing has changed in the ease of drawing. But in the quality of the proposition for archery elk, Wyoming's still number 1. I think Wyoming is number 1 for archery, and I think it's number 1 for rifle. Again, all my opinion. I think Montana is number 2 for archery. When you mix in every factor, right? The quality of the herd, the age class, the ease of drawing, the amount of public land, where the elk are in archery season, you got to take a lot of things into consideration. But I think Montana's number 2, and I think Idaho's number 3. So, there's always that meme that says, tell me I'm wrong, or prove me I'm wrong, or whatever. Maybe a bunch of people are going to send comments and say, you're wrong, Newberg. Okay, that's good. I hope people do that. Well, folks, I'm reviewing this video here about this value proposition we're trying to talk about. And I'm already through archery elk and rifle elk, and it's long. So we're going to cut it right here, and we're going to do video part 2 about deer and pronghorn. Sorry about that. I just have a tendency to ramble and carry on. So anyhow, I hope you got some value out of this. Hope you understand that you got to set priorities. You got to place that priority and budget in line with each other to get the greatest value. So we're going to wrap this one up and watch for part number 2, where we talk about the greatest value for mule deer and for pronghorn. Thanks for watching.